Good. Okay, so for those of you who just joined us, welcome. And just to let you know today for this webinar, the University of Leeds Business School is very kindly also hosting this as well with us. We do a lot of work with Leeds, and we're delighted that they have marketed this to their students, to their staff and alumni as well. So thank you very much to them. And we're delighted to have Clive with us today. But before we start, just to let you know that the recording will be, I'm going to post that on YouTube, on the Career Farm YouTube channel. So you'll have access to that. And as you've registered, then you will automatically get a recording of that. So if there's anything you want to relook at, you can go back and have a look at that. And just for those of you just coming in, there is a question and answer box that you can type in some questions. I will be looking at that throughout the webinar, keeping an eye on that. But we'll hold most questions to the end unless there's something that you'd like some clarification on that Clive's talking about. So let's start. I'm absolutely delighted to have Clive with us today about how you can contribute to a purposeful world. Now, I've known Clive for quite some time. He is the director of Primis, which is a global leadership development consultancy, which has their global HQ actually in Harrogate, North Yorkshire. There you go. And last year, I was just looking on their website. They delivered client programs in 16 languages in 40 countries and within 11 different industries. So very global, very broad reach, and worked with lots of different organisations. So Clive is a very experienced international consultant. He's committed to organisational sustainability and purposeful leadership. He also chairs the United Nations Association Harrogate as an advocate of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. He's an author of the best-selling books Designing the Purposeful World, that's published by Routledge, that was last year, and Designing the Purposeful Organisation, How to Inspire Business Performance Beyond Boundaries, and that was published by Kogan Page in 2015. And he's writing another book. He's a very prolific writer, puts me to shame. He's writing another book as we speak. So welcome, Clive. Welcome to the webinar.
Hello, Jane, and it's nice to be with everybody. Hello, everyone.
Okay, so I'm just going to pass the floor to you, Clive. Over to you.
That's great. Thanks, Jane. So, hello, everybody, and it's great to be with you. Jane, have I got presenter mode on the slides?
Yeah, you're ready to go.
Fantastic. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. It's great to be with you. And this webinar is based around the book that Jane mentioned, Designing the Purposeful World. And I'd actually like to start this webinar by inviting you on a time travel meditation. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, assuming you're not driving, of course, please close your eyes, and I'd like you to transport yourself to the year 2030. So this is 2030, and this is the world that you are happy to pass to future generations. So the world that you're happy to pass to future generations. And in our time machine, you get to travel to anywhere in the world that you choose to go. So just pick a country and put yourself there, be in the present tense in 2030, and just take a look around. Notice what you see. Do you see people? Do you see a built environment, or do you see nature? Just have a look around. What is going on? If there are people in your world, then what are they doing? Perhaps how are they getting about? What is the environment like? Do you see any signs of technologies? And if you're in nature, then what is that like? So I'll just leave you in your space for a minute to roam around and just notice what you see in this world that you're happy to pass to future generations in this year of 2030. Now, the good thing about my time machine is that we get to go anywhere we like. So why don't you transport yourself to somewhere very different? Again, anywhere in the world that you'd like to go. The year is the same, it's 2030, and it is still the world that you would like to pass to future generations. And again, in this different part of the world, take a look around. Notice what you can see and hear. Feel free to explore. You can move around, so take a look around the corner. Again, notice what is happening, and if there are people, what are they doing? Okay, for one final visit, pick a third part of the world, anywhere you like, and take a look around. Notice what is happening in this world that you're happy to pass to future generations. Good. Well, you can open your eyes and look at the screen again. And I invite you to go to the chat box and just type in maybe some of the places that you went and some of the things that you saw. Let's see what we've got from the audience.
Okay, so if you just type in what you saw, probably take a little bit of time for people to do that.
Did you go on the time travel, Jane?
I did, yes. Yeah, and I saw a beautiful mountain and clear water, a stream, clear air, mountains. I love the mountains, so that would be my happy place.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that would be my happy place. Someone's written down here, India, much more developed, cleaner and tidier. Someone else has written a beautiful beach with clear water and a clean beach, no plastic, no rubbish. Somebody else has written sustainable town with lots of public transport and trains, so trains and buses, but all electric and kind of clean pavements, no chewing gum. Someone else has written a university campus, lots of green living in harmony with robots.
Gosh, what a wonderful world people are seeing. What else are people seeing? Are you seeing anything different?
Yeah, there's one person that says that they have seen where everybody's equal, so and respected, just in terms of race and gender. Someone else has said trees, greenery, happy faces, clean air, innovative transport. Yeah,
fantastic.
Lovely. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic.
Oh, another
Excellent.
one. Portugal, busy city centre, people working hard, cosmopolitan population. New Zealand, clean air, mountains, lakes, less stressful than the West. And also Oregon in the US, mountains, less stressful, quieter than other states in Western USA. Great, thank you, everyone.
Wow. Well, what a fantastic world everybody is seeing. And actually, it comes as very little surprise to me because I've had the opportunity to do this several times since the year 2015. And each time I get pretty well the same results. And I've done this exercise face to face, over the internet, on 3 continents with thousands of people aged from 7 years old to well over 70. And every single time I do the exercise, I'm amazed. And the reason I'm amazed is that we all seem to want the same world, which is really inspiring. Not only that, but the world that people are seeing is exactly the same world as the world that has already been agreed by world leaders. So I'm guessing that you'd probably like to see that. How many of you, by the way, are aware that this world has actually been agreed? Perhaps type into the chat box if you know where it was agreed and when and how. And is anybody responding, Jane?
Not yet. Give them a moment.
Can't type that fast.
It's interesting because I think I saw you do this presentation a while ago, maybe a year ago, probably.
Yes.
And I certainly didn't know that this had been agreed. It was the first time I'd ever heard of it. Somebody has also said no, they don't know about it. Another person, no, not heard about this. What's this? So I don't think it's. And interestingly, somebody I was talking to this week, who he runs a community interest company that is and he's very into sustainable development, and he's very well renowned in Yorkshire. And I told him about what you're going to talk about, and he hadn't heard of it either. And actually, he's in charge of something where he's actually going to use what you're talking about to shape what he's going to do. And I'll tell you afterwards, because otherwise I'm going to spoil it.
Fantastic.
But yeah, I don't think it's very well known, definitely. So now you've got to tell it.
Yes, let's lift the veil and tell people what we're talking about. So I'm just going to put on the screen 17 goals that were agreed in New York in September 2015 at the United Nations. And this is actually the biggest commitment that the world has ever made, ever, by far. And these 17 goals that you can see on the screen now are the goals that cover everything that you've already talked about. We've heard people already today in the chat box, and as Jane has repeated, talking about clean air, clean water, life on the land, equality, health, no poverty, clean energy, innovation in our cities, and so on and so forth. And believe me, every time I do this exercise, I always say to people, and did you see anything else? Did anybody see anything different? And it always is within these 17 sustainable development goals. And people have, of course, asked the question, well, why don't I know about this? It seems like it's the world's best kept secret, or maybe worst kept secret, depending on your view, because this is something that actually we all want. And not only do individuals want it, but organizations want it. And there are so many businesses in the world and organizations in the world that are working to deliver one or more of these 17 goals. And they're not aware that actually the work that they do fits fantastically into this global agenda. And when they do realize it, of course, they can develop that as part of their brand and make it very clear to their customers and other stakeholders that they're actually working towards the same global agenda as perhaps other organizations. So there they are. Those are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And as Jane mentioned, I'm actually writing a new book at the moment, which is a sequel to Designing the Purposeful Organization and Designing the Purposeful World. And the new book, the working title is How Purposeful Leadership Transforms the World. And the point that I want to make in this new book is that actually we're all different. We as people are different, the organizations that we work in are different, and we all perceive our context differently. So even though, curiously, we see the same world, we're actually seeing it through slightly different lenses, let's put it like that. So when you look at those 17 goals, depending on who you are, what you do, what your background is, what your story is, you will be attracted to one or more of the goals more than perhaps several others. And what I'd actually like you to do then is, if you wouldn't mind going through the next slides until you come to a slide that looks rather like the one that's on the screen at the moment. And I'm not going to say anything. I'd just like the slides to appear one at a time for long enough for people to take it in. So maybe if Jane, if you're reading it, don't read out loud, but just read into yourself maybe 2 or 3 times and then move on to the next slide. And then, and that will give people the opportunity to notice, and perhaps if they've got a pen or pad in front of them, they can make a note of any of the goals that really inspire them. And I'd also like people to make a note of how they inspire them. You know, why are you particularly inspired by one of the goals? And then make that note, and if you get the chance, share it in the chat box as well, even as we're going along. So over to you,
Okay.
Jane. Take us through the
Okay.
goals.
Okay. So hopefully everyone's now had a chance to look at all those goals and have a look through them. So as Clive said, I'm just going to move through them quietly, and I'm going to read it in my head and then a few times then move on. So here we go.
Perfect. Thanks, Jane.
Okay.
Perfect. So if you'd like to make a note in the chat box of any of the goals that particularly resonate with you, and if you could also say in what way do they inspire you? Do they inspire you to take some action or to have a conversation with somebody? Just let us know in headline form what it is that you're inspired to do.
Brilliant. And we'll just give you a few minutes to do that while everyone takes some time to just consider and type that in. It's really interesting, isn't it? There are certain ones that you definitely get drawn to. I know there were ones that I'm particularly interested in. I mean, they're all interesting, actually. It's quite hard to choose which ones, but there are particular ones, I think, for me.
Well, it's interesting, Jane, at our UNA group, as you know, because you've been in the hot seat there, we always have somebody who's inspired to do something on one of the goals, and we get them to talk about their inspiration, their challenge, and then as a group, we help them to take new action. So, and it's always a different goal, and it's always inspiring. And we actually had our last meeting last night, and Anne brought the challenge of what on earth do we do with Yemen, and that was such an inspiring conversation, and she's doing all sorts of things now, so it really is wonderful.
Great.
So we're getting any chats?
I'm just going to look. It's just going to take me out of the presentation, but I'll just have a quick look. Okay. No poverty or hunger, gender equality.
Fantastic.
Inclusivity and equitable education for all, and gender equality goals, especially in the third world.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And if you can say what it is that you might do, if you're feeling inclined to do something, then please do say so. And it doesn't have to be earth-shattering action. It could be as simple as replacing light bulbs at home, or whatever it is that you feel inclined to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because it was probably about a year ago that I'd seen this, and actually it helped shape an idea that I had, and you may not know yet how you're going to do something about one of these goals, but it's useful to hold it in your head. I certainly found it really useful to use it to structure the project to help people have, at an earlier age, help them understand what a good career would be for them, and to prepare for the future of work, given there are so many kind of changes. And there's quite a few actually. So quality education, gender inequality, decent work and economic growth. So actually what I'm doing now is aligning itself to quite a few of these UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Fantastic. And I know you've done wonderful action since attending that workshop, Jane.
Well, I told you I would. That was the annoying thing.
Well, we hold you to account.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen some really interesting people, haven't we, do some interesting things. I remember particularly the guy who was looking at converting camper vans to be electric. So he was looking at a business idea.
Yes, and he's doing it.
Yeah,
Kit Lacey was his name. And he's doing it. If you Google Kit Lacey or go on YouTube, you'll find some videos of his wonderful electric, old-fashioned VW camper vans. You can actually book a holiday.
So yeah, we've got someone here who says goals 2, 4, 6, 12 and 14. Responsible management of water resources will be needed if the population rises further.
Definitely.
With education, lifelong learning for all, and ensure that more mature people in their working lives still are willing to learn new skills. Brilliant. Yes. Gently calling people out on their comments, read gender and small steps. Not quite sure what that means.
Oh, I think I understand that. Definitely.
Oh, I see. I see. No, I've got it now. So I think that means, yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, just picking up on things when really they they can be kind of subtle, can't it, about gender?
Well, it can, and it's having the courage to speak out and do it in a way that is authentic and suits you. But actually having the goals as a framework gives credibility to a lot of the things that people believe, because they suddenly realise that, guess what, I believe in something that's actually part of a global agenda that's been agreed by world leaders. So absolutely. It just gives credibility, and it does the same for companies as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that's absolutely right. And sorry, that lady has just said yes with regard to gender inequality. So yeah,
fantastic. I had the privilege recently of interviewing Juliet Davenport at Good Energy. She's the CEO there. Mm-hmm. And Good Energy is committed to renewable energy and clean gas. And the thing that motivates Juliet is the fact that this is essential to counter climate change. And since our conversation and since the workshop that we ran with the staff there, they've absolutely put the Sustainable Development Goals at the centre of their brand, which is fantastic to see. And there are so many companies doing the same.
And I think it's quite hard, the person who said gently call out on gender inequality. We've been doing some work with an organisation, and some of the ladies I've been working with find it very difficult to do that. It is a really hard thing to do. But I think if you can use the UN goals as a reason why, it just gives you a bit of backup, actually.
Absolutely, and it is so important. I mean, when you look at the trends, gender equality is only heading in one direction. Education is only heading in one direction. And if you look at the implications of that in a country like, for example, India, we mentioned India earlier on. I think somebody went there on their time travel. And in India, the girls are getting educated and the whole country is changing because when women get educated, all sorts of things happen, including, just out of interest, the fact that the population begins to decrease. Everybody thinks we're living in a world where the population's growing and growing and growing, but in actual fact, in countries where women are educated, the population begins to slow down for all sorts of reasons. And some forecasters actually predict that we will have half the population that we have now by the end of the century. So
let's hope
I
so.
could say more about that if anybody's interested.
It's a bit of the elephant in the room, really, isn't it? Population growth.
Absolutely.
No one really wants to talk about it. So somebody actually who I know, and I won't say who it is, but she said, as a careers manager, I'm passionate about empowering people to reach their full potential. My dissertation is looking at how can a knowledge of strengths help people in their career decision making. Interested in applying this to teens of all backgrounds. Wow, that sounds super cool.
Fantastic. Well, that's actually at the crux. It's actually at the crux of my new book, because the whole point is that depending on who we are, you put us into a different context and our purpose will change. So knowledge of our strengths actually affects our sense of self. And then when you place that self into the world, and if you have knowledge of the world, your purpose will arise. And so many young people, I mean, a lot of the audiences I've spoken with have been at schools and universities. And I can remember one guy who, when we were looking at the goals, he said, absolutely, goal 14, life below water. And I said, tell me, in what way are you inspired? He said, well, I'm a scuba diver and I'm sick of swimming around in plastic. He said, I now know what I need to do with my career. I'm going to clean the oceans up. It was absolutely wonderful.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. That's really great. So we've had some other ones since we've been talking. So goal 3, so good health and well-being, currently working in the NHS, create awareness of how everyone makes a positive contribution to this SDG goal as part of employee induction and development and leadership development awareness of overall goals. Goals 4 and 5.2, key goals that relate to the NHS. Somebody said that's a surprising thought about where the world population may go by the end of 21st century. Yeah, hopefully. I think well, it's a bit controversial.
Go on YouTube and search for it. You'll find some very interesting research. It's amazing.
Fantastic. So thank you everyone for those comments. That's really great. Brilliant. Just checking. Yeah, great. So we've covered all that. Good. So I'll just pop back into the presentation now, Clive.
Perfect.
So
excellent. Well,
yep.
That's the end of the core part of the webinar. And what I'd like to do now, if anybody would like to ask any questions, is to just field those questions via yourself, Jane, and sure. See where the conversation goes.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. I mean, I've got a couple of questions for you as people are typing in. One is, I think one of the hardest things is to try and get your organisation on board with these. Yeah. And have you seen any examples of people who've managed to do that, or you know, maybe from a fairly standing start? Can you give us any examples?
Oh, absolutely.
Of that? Okay, great.
Absolutely. And there's one that's very close to home and very timely, and that is at Prime East, the leadership development and organizational change consultancy that I work at. And we ran a session for our staff to say, you know, what are we already doing? What do you think we might be doing? And one of the things that came out of that was, why aren't we generating electricity on the roof of our offices? And just today, literally today, they're connecting a massive bank of solar panels. We have a big flat roof in our offices in Cardale Park in Harrogate. And that big bank of solar panels is getting connected. And we'll be not only covering our own electricity needs, but also exporting to the grid. So that just came out of an idea that somebody said, why don't we do it? And there are lots of other things as well. But, you know,
it's so always many sunny in Yorkshire.
It is, absolutely. Good.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and with organisations, you've obviously done some work with organisations and helping people to implement it into their organisations. Do you have any other examples, or
Well, I
perhaps
think
business
part of
ideas?
it is, yeah, well, to be honest, this is really beginning to take off. And if you
Mm,
actually look nowadays, you can actually invest into funds for organizations that are committed to the Sustainable Development Goals.
hmm
And this is beginning to get quite complex because um, organizations initially began to say, yes, we're absolutely keen to support the Sustainable Development Goals. We do work in this area. Maybe it's health, or maybe it's energy, or whatever it is. And of course, the next thing is people asking the question, so you're doing it, but what about your supply chain? What about all those materials that you use? So now organizations are auditing their supply chains to prove that not only the work that they do, but that the work that their suppliers do in their name
mm,
actually complies to the Sustainable Development Goals. And these funds are taking off. So that
mm.
will actually have a massive effect on the world, because if you think about it, if you're supplying goods to an organization that is committed to the SDGs, they're going to be asking you questions. So why not get ahead of the game and start to do your own audit before somebody asks you the awkward question?
Yeah, because it's always when you've got a deadline for for a contract that you've suddenly got to
I
pull it
know.
out of the bag. It just won't work, will it? It won't be as good
Yeah.
as if you've embedded it right from the start.
And the wonderful thing is that often it isn't about massive change. It's just about taking stock of all the great things you already do, and then
Mm,
just having a plan to say, what are we going to do next?
mm. Absolutely. And actually, a friend of mine, she used to be quite senior position in ASDA, and they realised that they actually don't talk a lot about what they do. So they actually do quite a lot of
I know.
recycling in terms of, cardboard and things. They take it back to the depot and they recycle it, but they just weren't shouting about it.
Yeah,
There probably are quite a few really good things that you already do as an organisation, and that could be a good start, and it could be a good PR thing that then might build as well.
absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, let's see if we have any questions here. Well, everyone's being quite quiet. um, yeah. Okay, so everyone's been quite quiet, Clive. So I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say about that, or any of the work you've done, or anything surprising from the UN meetings. I think, I'm interested to know why you actually decided to set up that UN meeting in Harrogate, and why did you get involved in this from at the start?
Well, when I wrote Designing the Purposeful Organization, and I got to the last chapter, we'd proposed a model of how you could actually align any organization to its purpose. And in fact, I happen to have the model here. We have them put on beer mats at Prime East, and we give them to help our clients and managers. But as I got to the end of writing the book, I realized that this same framework could be used for designing the whole world. Now, this is before the Sustainable Development Goals. So this was November 2014. And in December 2014, I actually read the first draft of the Sustainable Development Goals that prior to that I knew nothing about. And I thought, crikey, somebody must have read my book, because now the world is proposing a vision for humanity. And
Mm.
so I got really inspired by the first draft of the Sustainable Development Goals, and I decided that I would do whatever I could to promote them. So I started to run workshops, schools, universities, businesses, professional institutions. I decided to write a book. I set up a Facebook page, which is, if you search for SDGs, you'll find it. And I also wanted to give people the opportunity to meet. And I looked for an umbrella. And because, of course, it's done under the auspices of the United Nations, I decided that UNA, the United Nations Association, was probably as good a group as any. Now, the nearest branch to where I am in Harrogate was actually Hull. And I didn't want to be going 60 or 70 miles once a month or whatever to go to meetings in Hull. But surely there ought to be one in Leeds or Bradford, but there wasn't. So guess what? We resurrected an old group that there used to be a few years ago, the Harrogate branch, and now we meet at the offices of Prime East. And if anybody is interested, then they can just contact me. My details are on the slides, and we'll tell you how to get along and join our meetings. The next one, by the way, is February the 11th, and there's a young man coming along who is going to talk about how to insulate your homes and contribute to mitigate climate change in the process. So we get everything. We've had the CEO of Leeds City Council coming along and talking about sustainable cities. You mentioned the camper vans. We've had a solar power company, and we've had people who have ended up going to Kenya and Zambia to do work in the developing world with education, and you name it, we've done it. We've had something like 30 meetings over the last 3 or 4 years, and some absolutely wonderful case studies.
Yeah,
and the key thing is that,
carry on.
Sorry, Jane.
No, carry on.
I was just going to say the key thing is that the initial steps that people take, and I think this is relevant to the people attending today, is that whatever step you're thinking of taking, just take it. Do something. And what inevitably happens is that a bit of a momentum begins to pull in place. I mean, I've ended up installing solar panels here at my home in Harrogate. I've got batteries in the garage. I've got an electric bike. I am an electrical engineer by profession from my earlier part of my career, so I'm interested in these things. And that's the same for all of us. We get interested in something, and you don't have to do it all. You just have to make some progress.
Yeah, perfect. Good question here. These are wonderful goals, but how will they be measured? Do they have SMART objectives underpinning them? Great question.
They absolutely do. And if anybody is interested, if they just type in Sustainable Development Goals, measurements, or something like that, you will absolutely find it on the internet. There is a link on our Facebook page to something called the Sustainable Development Knowledge Platform, and all the goals, all the targets, and how they're measured, and they are measured and they're reported on every year. So you know,
is that by country then, Clive, or by
country? By country. Countries have to report their progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. I have to say, it's taking some time for countries to kind of get into the swing of it, and some are better than others. So you know, if you are keen to see this purposeful world, then by all means lobby your members of Parliament and see if you can urge them into making this a top priority, because it really is. I mean, we've seen so much coverage on things like climate change this year. If we don't take action, well, we will have to take action. So it's better to do it in a measured way than the last minute.
Yeah. Just got another question here. My questions are: what frameworks do you follow when trying to design the purposeful world? How do you build a team that can support the vision you have to design the purposeful world?
Okay, well, this comes back to the frameworks that are actually in the 2 books that I've written. So whether you're looking at designing the purposeful world or the purposeful organization, the key thing is to start with purpose. Purpose is simply answering the question, why are we here? And that's what organizations need to do. And there's all sorts of case studies in my books about organizations that have discovered quite inspiring purposes that are not necessarily the obvious ones. You know, it's the difference. To give you one example, the Malawian Revenue Authority, when I visited their headquarters in Malawi, they had a framed certificate saying their mission was to collect taxes and to all the appropriate standards. But when you actually talk to the directors about why are you collecting taxes, they begin to talk about programs for schools and roads and education. And rather than setting out to collect taxes in the poorest country in the world, in other words, taking money off your neighbors, the purpose of the organization truly is building a great country. And what a completely different way of thinking. And once we've got a purpose, then the next item is vision. How do we develop this into something we can actually see in the future? And that's what the SDGs represent, is a vision for humanity. And then it's about engaging, putting in place the structures, creating the culture in which this will happen, having the results that measure it, working out what success means to everybody, and understanding you mentioned strengths earlier on, Jane, how we can actually point the strengths of each individual at the purpose and vision of the organisation. And there are lots of ways of doing this, which they're all in my books, and lots of articles on my LinkedIn page as well, if anybody is interested. Do feel free, by the way, anybody, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, mention this webinar, and we can become connected.
Fabulous. Great. So that's all the questions that we've got. Thank you very much for taking us through the UN goals. And it's really nice to just have a bit of time to step out from, work to think about that. And it doesn't have to be big things. One of the attendees says she's wrapped all our Christmas presents in brown paper this year. So did I as well. That's and so I think there are little things you can do as well. But it's all, it all counts. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on which goals really resonated with you. I'll send out the recording and also a link to the project that I have been working on in using the framework of the United Goals. It's the United Nations Sustainability Goals, which is one around having a centre for the future of work. So a place where adults and children can really engage with what is a good fit for them in terms of, funnily enough, using their strengths. And Sarah's talked about that. But also helping people look at different types of careers and explore different types of careers and those careers that are going to be useful for the future. So I will send you a link to that project. We did our first project inspired by Clive's meeting on the careers in coding, and we had some ladies on there and young people talking about their careers in coding, what they liked, what they didn't like, and we streamed that to 5 schools. So that was great, and to really show people what the careers in coding are really like. So it was fantastic. So thank you very much, Clive. Best of luck with your new book. And as Clive said, do connect with him on LinkedIn and myself as well if you have any questions from this webinar or you want to find out a bit more. It's been fabulous to have you all on the call, on the webinar today, and thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much, Clive, for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure, and thanks to you and thanks to Leeds University for making this happen. It's been a pleasure being with you. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.